The explosion, I'm guessing.
Okay.
Explosion. Boom! And you're like,
So,
I'm gonna put it on the street. In front of my house.
we are live. Just so you know. All right. Cool. All right, so we are officially live. I have two people asking questions already. Just give me 1 second. One second. There you go. So we stopped at evidence of title, right? And the last one we talked about was certificate of title, right?
Yeah.
Now, since we're done with that, with the evidences of title, we're done with evidences of title. We're going to start talking about what is a marketable title, and then we're going to start heading to closing, actual closing, okay? So, marketable title. There's a question that I have usually for my students, which is, what is something that's marketable? Something that's marketable. If you're at home, you can answer too. I'll see it here. What is something that's marketable? Anybody?
Is available in the market.
All right. Available in the market. I have here something that is marked or goes in the market. Okay. So here's the thing. Something that's marketable is something that can be put on the market and is able to be traded, sold, right? It's something that has a value to the public. You got it? If there's an issue with it, then can you mark it? No. Or maybe you can, if the buyer accepts. So Shaisha said something that someone wants, right? It's true. Because when you go to the market, there's something available that you want. If it's available, you can buy, or again, as I said before, exchange, right? So marketable. I have a question. If you go to the supermarket and you buy milk, right? What is the first thing that you look at when you buy milk?
The expiration.
You said expiration date and you said date. Why didn't you say expiration date? No.
It's obvious, you know, that.
It's obvious date?
No, it's not.
Expiration date?
It's not obvious. Sometimes they have the wrong expiration date.
The wrong expiration date.
Well, no, not the wrong expiration date, I'm sorry. I meant to say, they have it there, but it's already expired, and then you go and buy it, and you buy something that is not.
Correct.
And
So,
that's what I'm always.
let me address something. When I was talking about milk, milk does not expire. Anybody that tells you that milk expires, Melanie, there's no expiration date.
Well, in the market.
It has a sell-by date.
Yeah.
It doesn't say it expired.
Well, but that's what we look for.
Okay, but it doesn't expire. It transforms.
Yeah.
It stops being consumable as milk,
Mhm.
and it starts being consumable as yogurt, cheese.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Byproducts of it. Somebody said yuck. All right. My question was, do you think somebody buys the expired milk? Is there anybody that would buy the expired milk?
Oh, yes.
they buy, but they don't know. It's just
No, they don't.
realize when they got home.
Oh, some don't realize, yes, and they pay full price. I would buy, not me, I would buy the expired milk.
Yeah, some people.
All right, Ida, why would you buy the expired milk?
Well, because, like you say, I can make something
You can make it.
You can make something out of it.
out of it. Yeah, I can make
Now,
something.
if it's expired, as you guys say, is it, when you buy it, is it full price?
No.
No, you're gonna buy it at
Has a
discount.
discount.
Does that make sense? Less money. Yeah, Tasia said less money, that's right. So something that's not in its original condition, you'll buy it at a discounted value. Very good. So what I meant to say with that is, in real estate, marketable title is when we want to make sure that there's no conditions to the title, meaning it's free and clear, there's no issues with the property, there's no issues with the title, we can buy this property, okay? If there's an issue, then the buyer has to agree to those issues. And if the buyer agrees to those issues, usually what does that mean? It means that they're going to try to negotiate, hey, there's this going on over here, like let's say an oil tank, there's this going on over here, I'm gonna pay $20,000 less. And if the seller agrees to that, they negotiated that property. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
They don't pay full price, they pay less price. So marketable title is something that somebody wants to sell or get rid of, and somebody wants to buy, okay? It could be in good condition, it could be damaged condition, but usually we try to get it in good condition. So it says right here, under the terms of the usual real estate sales contract, the seller is required to deliver marketable or insurable title to the buyer at closing. Generally, a marketable or merchantable title is one that is so free from significant defects. Make sure you highlight, underline, put stars, other than those that the buyer has agreed to accept. So as I gave you the example, somebody buys that expired milk. Somebody's willing to get it because they'll make more money out of it. If I buy a property that has issues, I'm buying it cheaper, like a divorce, probate, something like that. I'm buying it cheaper. I'm maybe fixing a little something about it and selling it for a higher price, and thus making my profit. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. Now, the purchaser can be assured against having to defend title. So if it's marketable, if there's no issues, that's what it is. Next, it says, proper evidence of title is proof that the title is in fact marketable, meaning sellable, transferable, giftable, okay? Today I'm on the roll of making up words, so just letting you know, if something pops out, I'm creating a whole new dictionary. Closing the transaction all the way to the end. It says right here, although salespeople are usually not burdened with the technicalities of closing, right? It's not up to us, right? We must clearly understand what takes place. Why do we need to know what takes place? Why do we need to know what takes place in a closing?
In cases anything is damaged.
No, as a realtor, as a salesperson,
Oh,
why do we need to know the process of closing? If we're not the ones closing, attorneys close, right?
Because you have to, how can I say, you're selling the property, so you have to.
You're part of the transaction, yes. And didn't I say from the beginning that our job is to consult? Our job is to advise. So it says right here, a real estate specialist should be able to assist in pre-closing arrangements. It allows us to be informed of everything in detail, and so that we do not get sued for missing information. That as well, that is very good. That's very good. That's a very good answer, actually. So we need to know, right? It's very important. We need to know, we need to say, hey, Mr. or Mrs. potential buyer, this is what's going to happen at closing. So we should prepare to have, one thing that's very important is down payment, closing costs, right? It's me. Okay, so Vast is Heidi. Okay, now I know who it is. Well, Heidi and Melanie, you have to raise your hand before you speak. Just messing with that. You need to know the true value, yes, that as well. But the true value for the closing is not really what matters for the process itself, Ms. Jones. What happens is we need to walk you through. You need to have, again, the down payment, the closing costs. Should be able to estimate that stuff. It says right here. We should be able to estimate those costs. Oh wow, I was just joking. So estimate those costs, because it happens more often than not that we get to the closing table and there's missing something.
Documents.
Usually closing costs are off. The buyers, guys, you don't train the buyers to be ready for the closing costs. People think, oh, all I need is 3.5% down payment plus closing costs. You guys understand? We get to the table, people get surprised at the end. Got to bring more money. It's our job to do it from the get-go, to say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Potential Buyer, 3.5% down payment is towards the purchase. At the end, there's going to be closing costs. What I'll do, assisting you, is I'll try to negotiate with the seller to maybe cover those closing costs through something that's called a seller's concession. You guys remember when we talked about that, seller's concession?
Yes.
Right? That's when the seller contributes towards the closing just to make the deal more appealable, right? Okay, cool. So that's what we must do. Figure out the approximate amounts and so on. All the way up top. It says, generally, the closing of a real estate transaction involves a gathering of interested parties at which the promises made in the real estate sales contract are carried out. And that is that the deed is delivered in exchange for the purchase price. Right? Simple. Here's the money. Give me the deed. And so on. In many sales transactions, there's two closings that actually take place. Two closings that actually take place. Just a quick warning for those of you that are home, if your internet lags a little bit because of the conditions, some of you are answering faster, some of you are taking longer in reaction to what I say. So if I skipped your question, I swear to God, I'm not doing it on purpose. I just saw that in a good way. I promise I'm not doing it on purpose. Better? Okay. All right. Sorry. No, I didn't mean swear like in a bad way. So I'm not doing it on purpose. It's just that I just saw somebody answer something I'd asked before, like kind of in the middle. So just make sure you guys understand that. Next, I was saying that there's two transactions that happen with the closings. So how can I address this? If it's a cash transaction, usually is we sit down, here's the cash, give me the keys or the deed, right? If it's a, it's Melanie answering. Wow. I don't have it out for you guys. But then there's another closing that happens if there's a mortgage. What is a mortgage? It's a loan. It's a financing against the property. You guys remember that? It's a lien against the property. So if there's a mortgage involved, if we cannot afford to pay cash, right, and we need to get money from the bank, then that closing must happen first before my closing occurs. So we need to wait until the money clears in the escrow account, whether it's the attorney account or if it's the, I'm sorry?
The broker?
No, not the broker. The broker doesn't get involved with that escrow money. It's either the closing attorney or the title company getting involved. So until the money is there, we, the buyer and the seller, do not close. So the first closing, as it says here, is the buyer's loan. The second closing is the actual closing of the sale, where the title is transferred from seller to buyer. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. You guys at home don't know what you're missing. We have a swimming pool outside. All right. As discussed in chapter 11, chapter 11 is contracts. You guys remember contracts? All right. So a real estate contract is the blueprint for the completion of the real estate transaction. Now, the buyer wants to be sure that the seller is delivering good title or marketable title. You guys remember that? Great. And that the property is in the promised condition. The property is in the promised condition. And this involves inspecting the title evidence, the deed the seller gives, any documents representing the removal of undesired liens and encumbrances, any survey, termites report, and leases if there are tenants on the premises. So this is all done at that time. And the seller, of course, wants to be sure that the buyer has obtained the stipulated financing and has sufficient funds to complete the sale. All right? So it's easy. The buyer wants to make sure that the seller has everything in order so it can be transferred. The seller wants to make sure that the buyer has the money, the funds, right? And if everything is agreed, right here it says, when the parties are satisfied that everything is in order, what do? They close. They exchange all pertinent documents, which will then be recorded. Okay? So at closing is like a final verification that everything is in order. This one's going to be quick. Lender's interest in closing. Lender's interest in closing. So everybody that's on the, I just want to make sure that everybody's on the same page, that we're not delayed. If you guys are lender's interest in closing, I want you guys to just type 1. That's all you need to put number 1, so I know that you guys are still there and that you are in the same spot as I am, please. Okay. I got 1, Edna. 1. Melody, 1. Everybody else went for the coffee break. All right. Whoever's listening to this, make sure they type 1 right now so I know that you are the same. We are on lender's interest in closing. All right. Type 1. Okay. Just put number 1. Perfect. Cool. All right. So we're just missing apparently 2 people to answer from the ones that are in the group right now. So lender's interest in closing. Just make sure that we are on the same page. As I mentioned, there's a little lag. It could be from bad internet over there. It could be bad internet over here, all because of the conditions of the weather. So lender's interest in closing. So it's very simple. I mean, if you're buying a property and you require funding, right? If you're buying a property, you require funding, then the lender is going to have an interest or a claim to your property, right? Because that's the lien, correct? So what happens here is they have a certain interest at the closing. They want to make sure they're protected. And how do they make sure they're protected? They want to make sure that at closing you have title insurance, right? And fire and hazard insurance policy, which is the homeowner's insurance, right? Survey, termite reports, or other inspection reports that might be required to make sure that the property is in desirable condition, right? A certificate of occupancy if the town requires. Establishment of a reserve or escrow account for tax and insurance payments. And representation by its own attorney at closing. Okay, so obviously, lender has an interest. If I see you, no, I do not see your face, Ms. Jones. I do not see your face. I just see your name. So whatever faces you guys are making at me right now, I do not see. I just know that you're typing. No, I can't. The camera's here. Oh, this. So this is the only thing I see. All right. Next. Homeowners insurance. Of course, Heidi. Now you can eat everything crunchy. You can make all the noise you want right now. It's fine. Maybe I should do this all the time. Just make everybody do it live at home. All right. All right, don't make me hungry. Stop. You need to move forward. Homeowners insurance. Everybody knows what homeowners insurance is, right? Homeowners insurance is the insurance that will protect the property in case there's damages to the property, right? Accident damages, nature damages. New Jersey requirements. We covered already this in previous chapters. It says before the closing on any 1 or 2 family house, technically a change of occupancy, the local government must certify that the building contains at least 1 properly installed carbon monoxide detector, as well as smoke alarms and fire extinguisher described in Chapter 9. We talked about the federal flood insurance program. If the property is located in the flood area, so right now just highlight, if it's located in the flood area, you will be required to have flood insurance. Okay, so at closing, that all must be disclosed. Good so far? All right. Vast. Heidi, you have a question. What's the question? Type faster. When we make house mortgage payment, does that include insurance as well through the bank, right? So not every loan is escrowed, okay? Not every loan is escrowed. The majority of the loans, especially FHA loans, they are escrowed. What does that mean? It means that principal, interest, taxes, and insurance are included. They're bundled into one payment, okay? So the question that Heidi is asking is if insurance is included in the mortgage payment. Not always, but most of the time, especially nowadays with a bunch of people defaulting on taxes, defaulting on insurance, the bank says, you know what, let us protect ourselves. You're gonna pay everything as a bundle. Because this way, we take a portion, so the escrow, yes, we take a portion of it and we put towards the escrow account. Once there's enough in that escrow account to pay the quarterly taxes, or enough to pay a semi-annual or annual insurance, we will. Okay? Was that good? You got it? Just type 1 if you got it. Cool. 1, 1. All right, so this is the rule. You're going to put 1 if you got it. You're going to put 2 if you still have a question. I'll address it, okay? From here on. Cool. It's just to make it faster instead of you having to type a bunch of stuff. RESPA requirements. We talked about this also in mortgages. That was chapter 15. We talked about RESPA. We talked about TILA, Truth in Lending Act. Here, RESPA, as I have highlighted in green, so I'm not going to go over it again. But as I have it highlighted in green, we're talking about Real Estate Settlement Procedures Act. So TILA, or Truth in Lending, was what's the cost of financing? What's the true cost of financing, right? So the APR, if you guys remember. In RESPA, it's the true cost of settlement. There could not be a difference in charges from the pre-HUD, which is the CD now, right? And the final CD, which is at closing. So there shouldn't be any changes. And this only applies to residential purchases. So RESPA applies to residential purchases, and it's only for settlement costs. Okay? All the way at the bottom just repeats what I just said. It says RESPA regulations apply only to transactions involving new first mortgage loans. So I want you guys to write purchases. New first mortgage loan purchases. Good? Good. Not relevant. There's about 20 people in the class. It's one of the questions. Can you all make noise? No, okay. What happened?
How many people are watching? Everybody?
How many people are watching? I think about 6, 7.
Not bad.
How many people are talking? Barely. Let me see. I have 8 viewers. Okay.
So I have like 50% of the class.
Yeah, I'm sure some people unfortunately might still be stuck in traffic.
Yeah.
You can. All right. On the right-hand side on top, it says, when a transaction is covered by RESPA, again, Real Estate Settlement Procedures Act, the following requirements must be met. Okay? Section 8, prohibitions against kickbacks. What does that mean?
What does it mean to kickback?
Sorry?
Kickbacks.
Kickbacks. I refer you a deal and you give me money for that referral. It's almost like a lead fee, right? So if I give you business, you pay me something. And Section 8 prohibits that, okay?
Even the people do it.
Yeah, they do it. Listen.
Yeah, I heard them do it.
Can we kill somebody?
Oh, yes,
We shouldn't.
yes.
Do people kill? Yes, unfortunately. Okay. Next, Section 9 prohibits lenders and sellers from requiring that buyers use a particular title insurance provider. No, it's not Section 8 housing. It's Section 8 of RESPA, something else. Okay. So, okay, let me address. Section 8 housing is a voucher. It's a program for assistance in rentals. Okay. This right here is RESPA, Real Estate Settlement Procedures Act, Section 8 of RESPA. Okay. Melanie, go ahead. What's your question? Type faster. Referrals, yes, I refer business to you. It says right here, when the insurance agency pays a kickback to a lender for referring one of the lender's recent customers to the agency. So that's prohibited. You cannot give kickbacks. You have to have earned it, as it says. You have to have earned it through your license. Okay? So if I was licensed insurance professional and I refer to another licensed insurance professional, then I get a referral. If I refer, I'm a realtor and I refer to a mortgage professional, the mortgage professional cannot give me any payment for that lead. Okay, even though we're licensed in different fields, we're still licensed, right? But again, it is different fields. Okay? All right. I talked about Section 9. Let's go to Section 10. Oh, sorry, Section 9, I cannot force you to use a particular title insurance policy, company, right? As far as Section 10, lenders are not required to maintain escrow accounts to fund property taxes and insurance. So, Heidi, you're asking if the insurance was included, and I said that most lenders require it, but it's not a requirement. I require it because I want to. It's not mandatory, yes. I require it because I want to, not because it's mandatory. What they're saying here is that if the lender does indeed require, they are limited to the amount of money they can charge up front. Now, don't forget, this is the escrow for closing. So what they ask sometimes is 2 or 3 months of taxes and insurance. There's a limit of how much they can. Here does not talk about that limit. It'll be a percentage. So we're just moving forward.
And that's only restaurant.
That's only restaurant. Okay. Hold on, somebody's in the wrong live. All right. Good. Question is, what is better through lender? So it's not what is better. To me, it's not better because obviously your APR will depend on that. If they're managing the escrow account, then they're paying a separate company to make payments for them and for you. So is it better? It's going to be costly. You probably won't feel much of a difference, but throughout the years, yeah. Can you deny it? No. For the first FHA, for instance, for the first year, so 12-month payments, you cannot even get out of it. In certain FHA loans, certain conventional loans, you might never be able to get out of it unless you refi to a lender that actually does not care about having the loan escrow. Make sense? Type 1 if you understood, type 2 if not, and I'll explain better. Heidi? So it's better to pay insurance on its own and mortgage on its own as well. So it's what I was saying, you know, it depends on if they allow you to pay on your own, yes. If they allow you. But again, FHA rules for the first 12 months, they might not allow you. And if you default on one of the months, then it resets the 12-month period. You got to be at least stable for 12 months before they consider getting you out of escrow. Okay? All right. TILA, RESPA integrated disclosures. In chapter 15, we went over this like 3 times. Here we're going to repeat again. It's those 3 business days for loan estimate. It's the 3 business days before the closing to get the CD, right? There cannot be a closing within 7 business days of delivery of LE and closing. So, TRID requirements apply to most federal-related first mortgage, first and second mortgage used to buy residential property. So TRID or the TILA rules and RESPA rules are only for purchases. Remember that, for purchases. They do not apply to home equity lines of credit, mortgage secured by mobile homes, reverse mortgage, cash transactions, and loans for commercial purposes, which we addressed, again, in chapter 15. All the way at the bottom, please highlight, underline, put stars, put bubbles, put arrows, whatever you want to put. But under TRID rules, the lender is required to provide a 5-page closing disclosure, which we saw in chapter, we saw the loan estimate in chapter 15. You're going to have a copy of the CD in a little bit. It's a 5-page closing disclosure, and that must be delivered at least 3 business days before. Make sure you underline before the closing, at least 3 business days before the closing, with the minimum of 7 business days between the issuance of a loan estimate and closing. So you apply for a loan today. The lender must give you an estimate of how much that loan is going to cost you, right? Within 3 business days. It means they must send it to you within 3 business days. From the delivery of that loan estimate till closing, there has to be at least 7 business days. And that's when I told you guys that, can we close in 2 weeks? The answer is yes. Can we close in less than 2 weeks? The answer is no. Okay. Will you close in 2 weeks? That'll be awesome, right? Most likely not.
They're not human.
They're not human. Can you have multiple closings in a week? Put a bunch of ones for that. Multiple closings in 1 week. Put a bunch of ones. So you remember that you're going to be #1 in your company. Oh, I said 1, not yes. You already failed. Okay, that's better. A bunch of ones. All right, this is a copy of a closing disclosure. You don't have to know this for real estate exam, but you should get familiar because you're going to see this at every closing, especially before the closing. So you sit down with your client and say, hey, this is your estimated monthly payment. This is what you got to put in closing costs. This is what you got to bring as cash to close, and so on, okay? So you should get familiar with this. New direction, I love that. Yes, absolutely. If you guys go anywhere else, I'll disinherit you. All right, 5 pages right there. Go to page 290. We talked about this. There should be no changes between the CD and the LE. No changes between the CD and the LE. Go up, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Mm-hmm. No changes between the CD and the LE.
Thank you.
All right. Next. Here are the highlights of the CD. Cost to close, page 1. So that's the rest of the part. The closing costs are now itemized. So first page, you get the cost to close, then it itemized on page 2. Then on page 3 it says a brief analysis of whether an item has changed or not from the original LE. Page 4 is more disclosures about the loan, and page 5 is a summary, a final summary of loan payments and your liability after foreclosure. Let's go to where it says title procedure. Title procedure. So on the date when the sale is actually completed, so what is CD again? CD is closing disclosure. It's like a closing statement that determines, it's the 5 pages there are before. So it's what gives you in detail what the loan is going to be, what the payments are going to be, and the closing payments as well. You got it? You guys got it? 1. Okay, some people dropped. Okay. So it says right here, as I was saying, on the sale, on the date when the sale is actually completed, which is the date of delivery of the deed, the buyer has a title commitment or an abstract that was issued several days or weeks before the closing. For this reason, the title or abstract company is usually required to make a second search of public records. So you guys remember when I said that even for your credit, at last minute, they're going to check your credit?
Yeah, not to use it.
So don't use it, don't breathe for the next 3 months, I said, okay? So when I said that, title company does exactly the same. All right, cool. Thanks for participating, Grace. Appreciate the answer. So the title company does exactly the same. Hey, I know you as a buyer, so that was on the mortgage side. As a buyer, we need to check you, but seller, I want to check as well if there's no changes to it, right? Why do we want to know if there's no changes to it? It says right here, the seller is required to execute an affidavit. What is an affidavit? It's a sworn statement in which the seller assures the title company and the buyer that since the date of the title examination, so the previous one, until now, there has been no judgments, bankruptcies, or divorces involving the seller, no repairs or improvements that have not been paid for, and that he or she is in possession of the premises. Through this affidavit, the title company obtains the right to sue the seller if his or her statements in the affidavit prove incorrect. So what did we say right here? We said that the seller is assuring title company and the buyer that, hey, there's no issues with the property other than the ones that we already agreed to. Because if we're buying with the current mortgage, if we're buying with the current lien, easement, encumbrance, any other encumbrance, right? Then the buyer is agreeing to it. The seller is just swearing, right, that there's nothing else that will pop up along the way. Make sure you put a bunch of stars there. On the right-hand side on top, checking the premises. Checking the premises. Quick question. Do you guys think that it's important to check the condition of the property prior to closing, maybe?
Yes.
Anybody? I think you said yes. Ally?
What is the premise?
The property. So premises is the property itself, the one you're buying. We're not talking about just the property, we're talking about
That's the land of
the land. So don't think property as the house, it's the whole land. What are you acquiring? Now everybody's saying, of course, saying yes. We got even Spanish claro que sí. Dora the Explorer.
Oh my God.
So you're saying yes, as you guys say when you're here. Now my question is, why is it important?
Because of what you said before. Let's say there's something being changed, and then the seller said, oh, the property is still the same, but it's not, because when you went there the day before the closing, they probably knocked out a window or door or something, and hey.
Or, like Rafael was saying, some Portuguese hired a crackhead to break into the property. Right? Imagine.
And then
But it could happen.
we sue you.
Then sue me, you would sue, right? Well, here's the thing. It could happen. It could happen that somebody vandalizes the property. It could happen that the seller vandalized the property.
Yeah, it might take.
You're saying, all right, Grace is saying any improvements can be done before. What do you mean by that? Yeah, adding, yeah. It could happen. I just want to make sure we're on the same page.
Why do you want to do that?
Are you saying that any promised improvements, any promised changes by the seller, which sometimes, hey, I'm buying the property, but I need this fixed. And before the closing.
Oh, well, but remember, you said nothing may be in state and
Say it again?
nothing to be in state before. That's why you want to check to make sure that everything is.
Correct, but that's where something's taken away, it's supposed to be part of the sale. Sue here. You mentioned Sue, and Sue
Yeah, it's already.
just says she's here. Okay, cool. That's funny.
It's like,
She knows you're talking about her. Don't talk bad anymore because she's going to sue you.
yeah.
So, to see if somebody's taken away and all that. But Grace, you mentioned, I want to go back to Grace. Any improvements can be done before. Here's what happens. When I inspect the property the first time, I said, I want to buy this property, but the leak must be fixed before closing. Yes, Grace. So the leak must be fixed before closing. So when you go for the final inspection, you want to make sure that it was fixed. Show me that it was repaired. Is that what you're trying to say? She has a little lag apparently. But yeah, you want to make sure there's no damages, and whatever was promised to be fixed before closing. That's why you do it before. So highlight the first sentence. Highlight the last paragraph right there of that section, please. Her name changes, Sue here instead of Sue you anymore. All right. You guys good? Give me a 1, type 1 if you guys are on the same page. We're about to go to releasing existing liens. Releasing existing liens. All right. Heidi says, yeah, but closing can still take place if between the seller and buyer agreed to leave money in one escrow account for any type of damages. Yes, absolutely. But if anything was promised before, it should be fixed before. So we get to that point and they haven't fixed it, then yes, like Heidi said, hey, you were supposed to fix this. It costs roughly $3,000. So make sure you put $3,000 in escrow. Otherwise, we're not buying. If you put $3,000 in escrow, then we might proceed. Okay? Okay. All right. Next. Releasing existing liens. Releasing existing liens. Oh, hold on. One says bad service, and that's the excuse for not understanding the question or the answer. Just kidding. And then Mrs. Jones, what is your question? Go ahead. What didn't you understand? You can type it. What didn't you understand? Waiting. You thought first was the inspection. All right, so you are absolutely right in that, but there's the homeowner's inspection where you hire somebody to do the inspection of the property right in the beginning, right? And then the inspector gives you a report. And that report is going to detail, hey, this needs to be fixed, that needs to be fixed. That is okay, but my recommendation is that it is fixed. And then the buyer looks at it, says, hey, cosmetic, I'm not so worried. Structural, yeah, make sure you fix, right? So hold on a second. So make sure you fix. So that's the inspection report because of the homeowner's, the home inspection that was conducted. Now, we agreed to changes. We agreed that you were going to fix something. So the contract keeps performing until we get to closing. But right before the closing, I'm going to inspect the property to make sure what you promised to correct based on the inspection was corrected. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no surprise.
No surprises. That's what it is. So there's the inspection from the home inspector. There's your visual inspection, and then there's the final walkthrough, which is your last visual inspection. Melanie, you did not raise your hand. That's why you say still waiting. So, Mrs. Jones, you said, did we say that we're purchasing on the spot? No. What we're talking about up here, checking the premises, is the final walkthrough. You can write somewhere there, final walkthrough. Means that the 3 months went by or 2 months went by, something like that. Okay? All right. You have a bad connection waiting. And that means exactly what? You have a question, or you're just not being able to see it?
Our internet service is very bad.
Yeah. Cool. So this thing is good and it's bad because I have to wait for that lag.
Do you know what they can do to avoid it? They can go closer to the little tower that I have around.
Go closer to the router. No, but also with the weather, it's affecting a lot of people. Cell towers are affected. So, but yes, make sure you guys are right next to your router.
Yeah.
Be right next to your router.
Yeah, make it faster.
So, Melanie, what's going on? You have a question or just bad connection? That's what you're telling me because you said waiting 3, 4, 5 times. No, 4 times. No. All right. Since I'm waiting, releasing existing liens. We'll see how it goes. Releasing existing liens. When the purchaser is paying cash or is obtaining a new mortgage in order to purchase the property, the seller's existing mortgage usually is paid in full and released into public record. So remember we talked about alienation clause or due on sale clause. That means that the loans must be paid at the time of closing. That means that when the title transfers from person A, the seller, to person B, the buyer, the lender that lends to person A, the seller, says, hey, give me my money before person B takes over. All right, so it must be paid in full. So how do we pay it in full? Well, we need to know what's the balance on the loan. Is your mortgage statement the balance? Is it accurate for the whole month? No, it tells you of the previous month. So for you to get, to figure out what the balance is, you need to request what's called a payoff statement or a payoff quote. So you got to call the lender, the first mortgage lender, second mortgage lender, any other people with financial liens against it. Call them up and say, hey, I want the final statement. I need to know how much I owe you because I'm selling the property. And then it'll give you the payoff statement as it says here. It's going to include the principal balance. It's going to include interest, and they'll say interest, taxes, fees, or anything that's involved, and they will say it's valid for the next 30 days. Beyond the 30 days, you charge an additional 1 point whatever percent, as an example, per day. And that's just to give you an idea that if it takes longer to close after the payoff, your title company is going to have to calculate the difference. If it's too long after, then you have to call back and request a new payoff statement. Okay? All right. Next page. Closing and escrow. So before we continue, do me a favor whenever you can. Any questions, except the ones I just gotten right now, but any questions, do through the chat on the YouTube video, so this way we have ongoing. I want everybody to tell me, yes is 1, you understood. No is 2. Make sure that you, when you put 2, I'll ask you what is the question that you're having, okay? But I want to ask you a question. I just got a quick complaint that I'm screaming. Are you guys hearing my voice too loud and with echo, or it's okay? I just want to make sure so I'm not here yelling at you guys. You can write echo or too loud if it is. All right, I got you're good. I got to know it's okay. Clear. Are you going into shock, Tasia? Clear. Sounds good to me. All right, cool. Can you guys hear me like this as I'm talking? Instead of me raising the voice. Okay, cool. So, closing in escrow. What does escrow mean? What does escrow mean?
Is it an account that you put in the money?
Okay, so the term escrow itself, it just means third party.
Okay.
Now, you mentioned an account. Here we're talking about closing in escrow. So it's either a separate account, yes, interest-bearing account could be. The thing is, it's to put other people's belongings, other people's money, other people's documents. In this scenario, guys, the closing in escrow means we use a third party, unrelated third party, where we deposit our documents as a seller and deposit our documents as a buyer. And once everything is in order, we close. Okay? So it says right here, in an escrow closing, a disinterested third party authorized to act as escrow agent coordinates the activities. So before we used to have a closing attorney, but usually the closing attorney was the buyer's attorney. Isn't the buyer's attorney representing the buyer? All right, so there could be a potential interest there and therefore liability. If something goes wrong, oh, you did that because you represent the buyer. All right. So what they decided to start doing now in Jersey, it's used a lot in the other states, but Jersey is becoming more and more common. They're putting a title company doing the work because the title company does not represent the seller, does not represent the buyer. They're a disinterested third party. Okay, so the seller brings the documents that needs to bring to the title company. The buyer brings the documents they need to bring and monies to the title company. And that's what it says here in green right at the bottom. And when all other conditions of the escrow agreement have been met, the agent is authorized to disperse the purchase price to the seller and to record the deed of the mortgage title. So what happens is everything is in order. The agent, so you guys remember there's two closings, right? There's the closing of the loan, so money comes into the title company's escrow, right? Then when everything is in order, we go to the actual closing. Once we actually close, then the title company will take the money from the escrow account that they have. So there's the escrow documents, escrow account for monies, right? They take the money from the escrow account and transfer to the seller. Hey, congratulations, here's your money. You got it? And then transfer also to the realtor, transfer to the, whatever the fees were. So whatever the closing costs were, we're talking about recording, we're talking about insurance, we're talking about attorneys. So they distribute everything from the money that came from the lender, the buyer's
Do it
lender.
at the same day of the closing?
Traditionally, yes, everything's done the same day or the next business day, depending on what time we close.
Okay.
So once that is done, now we take the documents, the title company goes to public records and reports all the documents. One releasing the previous and the other one's the new guy, okay? Any questions on this? Raise your hand if there's a question. Did everybody understand? Type 1 if you understood what I just said. Please. This works. You know what I'll do, guys? I'm going to print a bunch of 1s and 2s and put a stick on it. So when you guys are here in class, if you have a question, now if you're okay, you'd say 1. If you have a question, you say 2. All right.
You don't want to do that with them here.
Huh?
You don't want to do that with them
Like,
here.
but
They will
so
get
we can
crazy.
actually before,
Right.
like,
Say it again.
can you use the WhatsApp, the group, the class? So if they want to ask questions, just, they record, like, the voice record.
Mm.
There's,
No, but it's being recorded and all the chat.
Mhm.
This is from the YouTube live.
okay.
So I'm seeing the chat live. That's why I'm constantly going here to check what they're asking or what they're agreeing with.
Okay.
So, and then it's recorded, so it stays there.
I understand, but if you have your phone, for example, you have the WhatsApp,
Uh-huh.
you want to do the phone on WhatsApp. They record like the questions, they send to you right away. So
Oh, the
you
voice
don't-
questions.
Record, yes. No? No, you don't want to hear their voice.
No, it's just, I don't want to,
It'll be fun.
you guys heard that? I don't want to hear your voice. That's what it is. That's why I called for a storm and send you guys home. Now, the problem is then I have to always go to the phone. So it's here, at least I'm looking,
Mhm.
it's a little different.
It's more visual than hearing.
Correct. If I had an assistant or somebody that would be like, hey, this question just came through, right? That'll be a different story. But since I'm going through the book and now I have the questions right here, it's a lot easier. Like with the 1, put a 2, and if it's a 2, okay, so person, whatever, tell me what it is, okay? All right. Preparation of closing statements. So until now, there's nothing that we do, right?
Mhm.
As salespeople, we don't get involved in none of this, but we should know everything. Here's another one. Are we the ones that prepare the closing statement? The CD, are we the ones that do that? The answer is no, we're not the ones that do it. So it says here, a typical real estate sales transaction involves numerous expenses for both parties in addition to the purchase price. And there are a number of property expenses that the seller pays in advance for a set period of time, or that the buyer pays in the future. Please highlight, underline, put stars. It says the financial responsibility for these items must be prorated. What does that mean? Prorated means adjusted proportionally between the buyer and the seller. We know there's a bunch of expenses, but I want you to go to the next paragraph. It says, closing statements are prepared by buyers and sellers' attorneys, title officers, or bank representatives. Does it say that we're the ones that prepare?
No.
No. It says everybody else but us, right? Cool. So if we're not the ones that prepare, why do we need to know this?
Because we help in the order.
Because we're helping them. Absolutely. So it says right here, the broker should, however, possess the necessary knowledge to prepare statements so as to give the sellers an accurate estimate of sales costs. Why? Because Mr. Seller, even though you're selling for $100,000, yes, we are consultants. Because we're selling for $100,000,
That's not me.
closing costs are estimated at, an example, 5,000. So how much are you gonna take home after closing? Well, 100,000 minus my 6% as an example, minus the $5,000 of closing costs, right? We had this example in the previous chapter, right? This is how much you're taking home. So we should be able to estimate more or less, because it's a percentage. We should be able to estimate more or less what they're gonna have to pay before they take money home. For the buyer, we must be prepared with the proper amount of money to complete the purchase. And again, the broker should be able to assist by making the reasonably accurate estimate. So we should be able to say, Mr. or Mrs. Buyer, 3.5% down payment, great. And then roughly 2.6%, as an example, 2.6% of the purchase in closing costs. So we're looking at an extra X amount of money to have at closing. Now, bear in mind, it could be more, it could be less, but it shouldn't be too far off of this. You guys understand? It's kind of like, hey, be ready just in case. We might be able to get the seller to pay the closing costs, but make sure you have the money aside just in case.
No assuming.
Yep. All right. Next, how does the closing statement works? It says the completion of the closing statement involves an accounting of the parties' debits and credits. You guys should know what debits and credits are, because every time you put money into your account, it's a credit to your account. It's a plus to your account. Every time there's a debit, it means you swiped or you withdrew money from the account. It's a minus on your account. So that's a withdrawal. So a debit is a charge, a withdrawal from your account. It's an amount that the party being debited owes, right on top, and must pay at the closing. A credit is an amount entered in a person's favor. A credit is an amount entered in a person's favor. So it's a plus, an addition, an increase in your account. So either an amount that the party has already paid, and I'll explain that better in a little bit, an amount that the party must be reimbursed for, or an amount that the buyer promises to pay in the form of a loan. So to determine also these debits and credits, we go over all the expenses, everything that's income, everything that we already prepaid. We adjust all that, and then at the end it says, the buyer usually brings a bank's cashier check or certified personal check. So it doesn't say cash, does it? So you got to bring cash. But what they say cash is cashier's check or certified personal check with a balance. A similar procedure is followed to determine how much money the seller actually receives. So again, we're going to look at how much money the seller is due minus all the expenses. And finally, the total of the seller's charges is subtracted from the total credits to arrive at the amount that the seller will receive. I'll explain that better in a little bit.
Well, certified, check, what is it? It says a personal check, but.
Yeah, so you either get the bank's check, or you have you have write a check and you go to the bank, they stamp it or they sign it.
Or they have those front
That's like,
Yeah, or the voucher as well.
And why has to be.
Consider it a
certified?
voucher.
And why has to be, certified?
Because a personal check is very risky. So the certified is pretty much the bank said, yes, there's funds.
Exactly.
Right.
Okay, so it's either you ask for a bank's cashier's check, you go there, hey, this is what I want, or you wrote a check and they go like, certified that there's funds, don't worry.
Okay.
It's just that if you ask the bank's cashier's check, you might have to pay a fee, depending on the bank you're with. Certified,
I think if you have an account, you don't have to pay them.
all right,
Some banks, they charge you anyway, even you're not account with them.
yeah, all that stuff. And Edna goes, it's to make sure that the check does not come back for non-sufficient funds.
Yeah.
So you want to make sure bank's cashier's
It
check
doesn't
or certified personal
It's
check,
a balance.
yeah, it doesn't bounce, right?
I need right now $100,000 check.
Write it down. If you got the money, it's going to be
You got the
okay.
money, why not?
Grace is asking if on the day of the closing, can you pay an extra down payment to the loan? So usually everything is already set towards the closing. Can you the next day, well, you're gonna have to have a billing information, but can you, for instance, the next day contact the lender and say, hey, just want to throw an extra 20,000? No problem. Can you in 45 days when your first payment comes in, give an extra 20,000? Yeah, there's no prepayment penalty. But at closing, usually minor changes will be addressed at closing, not an extra down payment to the loan, because the closing has nothing to do with the loan. The loan was arranged prior to the closing. At closing is between you and the seller, not between you, the seller, and bank. Okay? Did you get that, Grace? Okay, Melanie got it. Melanie's name is now Grace. Just messing with you. Grace has a little lag. I've noticed her answering or asking like a little later than everybody else.
Mhm. Also, it could be her PC, her laptop or PC, whatever she's using.
The tablets.
The tablet, whatever she's using, she can be making school.
All right, she got it. The answer is in. All right. Next time, number 1. Just put type 1, so it's easier, it's faster. 1 travels faster. All right. Broker's commission. So we're going to address the expenses. We're going to address all the expenses in a closing. Again, why we need to know this? Because we are consultants, and we should be able to tell the client, if you represent the seller, hey, here's who's paying this. Buyer, here's who's paying that, right? So it says right here, where there's no buyer's broker involved, the commission is paid by the seller. Okay, simple. When the buyer has specifically hired his or her own broker, the agent's commission is sometimes paid by the buyer. In many cases, in fact, in most cases, who pays the commission? The seller has already agreed to pay the commission. So in most cases, the seller said, hey, you're listing my property, I'm paying. Okay, so that's 6% or 7% negotiated right off the bat. Attorney fees, who pays the attorney fees? Well, whoever hired the attorney. If the buyer hires the attorney, then the buyer pays the attorney's fee. If the seller hired an attorney, then the seller pays his or her own attorney fees. Recording expenses. Well, the seller usually pays for recording charges or filing fees that are necessary to clear, go to the next page, to clear all defects and furnish the purchaser with a clear title in accordance with the terms of the contract. Next paragraph says that the purchaser pays for recording charges incident to the actual transfer of title. So what I'm saying here is very simple. Up to the day of the closing, the seller is responsible for any charges to release a mortgage or anything else that's on title. The seller is responsible for that. From the day of the closing and on, so there's going to be a new deed, there's going to be a new mortgage, there's going to be new everything. The buyer is responsible for it. So all we said, and we're going to repeat this a bunch of times, is up to the closing date, the seller is responsible for all payments. From closing date and on, there's a new owner of the land, right? The landlord, the new owner of the land, and he or she is responsible for any new charges to be recorded. Yes?
Yes.
I answered? Okay, cool. All right. Transfer tax. So every time you sell a property, there's a value to the property. You guys know this. And it has to be the true purchase price. We've addressed this. That in New Jersey, if you sold for $351,265 with 33 cents, it must be declared that value. It cannot be $1 or love and affection. If it is $1 love and affection, you have to have an affidavit that says, sworn statement, this was a gift. You guys remember that, right? Mm-hmm. So because there is a value, just like in your cars, when you sell your cars, there is a value in the sale. State of New Jersey wants to make sure that the seller pays for that value. And that's called realty transfer fee. And the realty transfer fee highlight, is charged, always charged to the seller. So who pays the transfer tax? Seller. Okay? Here shows table 21.1, gives you an idea of the transfer fees. Here's the good news. State exam does not ask you to calculate transfer fees. On the right-hand side, on top, it says title expenses. Title expenses. Do me a favor, whoever's listening to this, I just want to make sure you're still connected. Press 1. Type 1 if you're still connected, please. Just want to make sure you're still there. All right. Did we lose some people in the process? Type 1 if you're still there. Okay. Got 4 people. All right. You guys didn't type 1 just because you're here?
I did, but you didn't see it.
Ah, okay, got it. All right, just to say something. There you go. So, title expenses. Title expense says the responsibility for title expenses varies according to the contract, which usually follows local custom. If the buyer's attorney inspects the evidence, or if the buyer purchases title insurance policies, the buyer is charged for these expenses. So majority of the times, the buyer is the one responsible, because yesterday we talked about this. There's something called constructive notice. You guys remember constructive notice? Type 1 for constructive notice, if you guys remember constructive notice, right? Is when we put something into public records. Now the seller records, hey, I just bought this property, and puts it into public records. When I go sell it, do I have to bring those records to you? No. If you guys remember, Sebastian stood up, came here to see what I had written on the tablet. See, constructive notice, okay, is I go to public records and I file something, right? If I'm the buyer, I either go search, I'll do the title search and see, hey, who's the owner of record? Is there any mortgage? Is there any other liens against this property? Any easements? Any encumbrances, right? Anybody that has an interest or possession of the property, including tenants and all that stuff. So it's up to the buyer in New Jersey, it's up to the buyer to do all this research. So title expenses are brought on to the buyer, okay? Miss Sue, you put number 2. What is your question? Type the question real quick. One, remember now? That's a good answer. All right, cool. So that's what it is. The buyer is the one responsible for researching, therefore the expenses are on to the buyer. But look what it says at the bottom. It says in some areas, the seller pays for the initial search and the purchaser pays for the redate charge. Elsewhere, the buyer pays for the search. So as I said, usually the buyer is the one responsible for these fees, right? But can the seller do a preliminary search, let's say, an initial search, and then the buyer just pays for the difference?
Yeah.
Of course. In fact, in my professional opinion, whether you guys want to do this or not, in my professional opinion, you should talk to the seller. Hey, you're about to list this property. How about we do a title search just in case, so we have no surprises? And then because you already did the title search, and title companies are disinterested third party, it is possible that the buyer will use the same report and the same title company, and we speed up the process.
And we get paid attendant.
And we get paid attendant. Does that make sense? All right. So my recommendation is that you ask the seller, before you sell, do a home inspection and do a title search. Do they have to do it? No. It's our professional recommendation. Okay? So it says right here, usually the buyer pays because the buyer is the one responsible for it. Loan fees. If there's a loan, who pays for the loan? Who's acquiring a loan in order to close?
The bond.
The buyer. So loan fees, origination fees, and all that stuff is to the buyer. Next page. Very good. We already addressed this. Escrows. This is tax insurance reserves. I told you that the lender requires a certain amount at closing towards taxes and insurance, just in case the seller has not paid it. There's an unpaid bill, right? Or if the buyer defaults, it's already money right there. Because you don't want to lose, the bank doesn't want to lose the title to the property because of a tax bill, and does not want to lose the value of the property because there's no insurance, there's a buyer, right?
Yeah, because you're mortgage.
Correct. All right.
Extremely late, but.
You're on time, everybody else is at home, relaxing. Thank you, Ms. Clemens, for coming in.
Oh, sorry.
Yep, an hour and a half. Wait, but you made it. And it looks like you were swimming.
He's swimming?
Yeah, I'm just, it's a joke. Additional mortgage-related fees. So if there's an FHA loan, we know that there's MIP, mortgage insurance premium. Who pays for that? If it's mortgage, it's the buyer. Appraisal fees. Who requests the appraisal? Usually, traditionally, the buyer. Why? Because the mortgage company said so. In order for us to finance the purchase, you must appraise. I need to know the value of this property. You're buying it for $300,000. I want to make sure the property's worth $300,000 or more, right? So therefore, the buyer pays. Edna, the corn reference, I did not get it. Survey fees. Survey says the buyer pays. Yes, Edna, I got it. I was joking about not getting it. So the corn image is because the joke was corny. Thank you. As long as you remember, that's what matters.
21.
We are on 21. What page are we on right now?
290. Actually, 293. Is by the
Buyer, yes.
survey fees.
At the bottom, prorations.
293. Survey. And you're right. And you're right and you're left.
Prorations.
Prorations.
Next page?
On the right-hand side of it, yeah.
Into the left, in the middle of the book.
Look, somewhere there.
I see it.
No, I'm just kidding. It's like to the right, to the left, and in the
It's
middle.
actually in the southeast west of the
Oh, in the southeast, west, north, all that stuff. Prorations. It says most clauses involve the dividing of financial responsibility between the buyer and the seller for such items as loan, interest, taxes, rents, and fuel and utility bills. These allowances are called prorations or adjustments. Make sure you highlight, put stars, bubbles, and all that stuff. Prorations are necessary to ensure that the expenses are fairly divided between the seller and the buyer. So between the seller and the buyer. Not even from home. I still get the most amazing questions.
Right. You're not saying,
I can't get on the internet.
I'll explain later.
Like,
All right. So if you're watching on the tablet, you can have your bathroom break while on the tablet. Next.
I didn't hear that.
And then Edna says that I'm the one that's corny. Anyway, so prorations. Do you guys agree that there's some stuff that the seller has prepaid? Like, for instance, taxes. I might have paid the bill up front. If I prepaid, let's say the whole year, we are now on August 7th, and I pay the whole year, and I'm selling the property to you. Is it fair that I eat that bill and you get nothing? You don't have any responsibility? It's not. So understand, prorations means we're adjusting everything to today, to the closing date, where we share the responsibility or liability between the seller and the buyer. So if I prepaid something, I must be reimbursed for what I prepaid. That's where prorations are. If I have something unpaid, is it fair to you, the buyer, that there's something unpaid and now falls on you? No. So I must, from my payment, I must pay you.
It goes either way, either you own or you.
Correct. Either way. Proration, can you give an example? So that's the example I was giving right now with taxes. But yes, I'm going to go into more examples in a little bit. So at the bottom says, as interest is usually paid in arrears, at the end of the period for which it is due, each payment covers the interest of the preceding month. So if we have a mid-month closing, the seller who has not made the current month's payment might owe 6 weeks back interest on a mortgage. So I'm now going to tie it in with this. It says accrued items. Accrued items are items to be prorated, such as water bills and interest on an assumed mortgage that are owed by the seller, but usually will be paid by the buyer. The seller, therefore, gives the buyer credit for these items at closing. So you're asking to give an example. Here you go. Unpaid water bill. The seller is responsible for it, but the day of the closing, they're not making this payment. So what they do is they give credit, so it's right there, they give credit to the buyer for any unpaid bills related to the property. Okay? Type 1 if you understood that. 1 if you understood it. Meanwhile, we have prepaid items. Prepaid items are items to be prorated as well, such as taxes and fuel oil left in the tank. They have not been prepaid. They have been prepaid by the seller, but not fully earned. They are therefore credits to the seller. So as I said, I prepaid the taxes for the whole year, and we're closing today. You, the buyer, have to pay me for the difference between today and the remainder of the year. Okay, so again, prorations are adjustments of unpaid or prepaid bills to whoever deserves it. If it's unpaid, this is something for you to write down and for you to remember. If it's an unpaid bill, seller pays or credits the buyer. If it's a prepaid bill, buyer pays or credits the seller. Hold on, in my case, they didn't. So they reached out the last owner to pay.
If it's unpaid bill, the buyer.
Say it again.
If it's unpaid bill, the buyer.
If it's unpaid, the seller credits the buyer at closing. If it's prepaid, the buyer pays the seller, credits the seller at closing. So Grace, if there was something that was not declared, that's why the seller signed the affidavit we said. All right, so wait, one question at a time, but good that you're typing so I can address one by one. That's perfect. I'm telling you, I think I'm going to implement this system. We're going to be live and then you're typing in the questions. Back to Grace. So in your case, they didn't do so. Remember I said earlier that the seller has to sign an affidavit of title that says, hey, to the date of closing, there's nothing that hasn't been paid for. Everything is paid. Nothing unless what you already know. Okay? So if there's any surprises, you can come after me. Grace, in your scenario, you were able to say, hey, I'm the new owner. Here's the deed, right? If you want to sue me for money that was unpaid by the seller, then you can. But the title company will take care of it. The title company will just say, no. Let's redirect the case because the seller was the one originally liable and they did not pay. Actually, here's a sworn statement that says, I, the seller, am responsible for any unpaid bills that might show up after this closing. That's pretty much what it says. And that's what happened with you. Right, Grace? As far as Heidi, it says after closing, can we still go back and request money for unpaid bills? It's exactly what I just explained. Yes. All right. So you as a buyer, you're not liable for unpaid bills. Yasmin, why do they prepay the seller? No, it's not prepay the seller. It's the seller, like I'm the seller and I decided to pay the whole year worth of taxes. See, taxes they're brand new. On January 1st, there's a new tax bill for the whole year. And I said, you know what? I don't want to be bothered with this monthly payment or quarterly payment. So I said, hey, $12,000 towards the taxes, paid off, done. But then in August, I decide to sell. So today we get to the closing. I decide to sell. We get to the closing, and I already prepaid the year. So Yasmin, is it fair if I prepay the whole year? Is it fair that you, the buyer, take that benefit? No. You need to reimburse me. So prepaid, I prepaid. You need to reimburse me a portion of what I prepaid. And that portion is what you're going to benefit, which is from August 7th and on. Okay? As far, know what? I got Grace saying yes. I got Yasmin saying no. Can I get a maybe? I was going to go for hallelujah, but I didn't know. You got it? So, all right, cool. Any questions before we move forward? It was no to my question, okay. All right. General rules for prorating. I want you guys to highlight exactly as it says here. Hope you guys can see it at home. Let me bring this up a little bit. Do me a favor. Type 1 if you can see this at home, whatever's on the screen right now. Type 1 if everybody can see. Type 2 if you cannot see it. I'm trying to make it as large as possible so you can see it at home. Cool. You know, this is great because then we get engagement. That's awesome. I know that they're actually there. Good job that the ones that are participating from home, and great job for the ones that made it here. So, some people got here paddling. Bye, Janine. He came through the water paddling.
Yeah,
Swimming. All right. So proration is generally provided that the buyer owns the property on the closing date. In practice, however, either the buyer or seller may be charged with that day's expenses. What we're saying is, as an example, I'm not setting this in stone, but I want you to work with me in terms of common sense. If we close in the morning, today, if we closed in the morning, who's going to benefit from today's property, right? Who's going to benefit today in the property? The buyer. So if the buyer is the one benefiting from the whole day because we close in the morning, should the seller or the buyer be charged with today's charges?
No, it's the buyer.
The buyer, right?
For the date.
Correct. But if we close right now at night, the seller spent the whole day in the property, so the proration should count as of tomorrow. Right, I did not get the okay buy. There's a 1. So 1 means you understood. 1 means you can see it. No question. So what was the okay buy? All right. Even through a message, I can get attitude. That's awesome. While she's eating something crunchy. I know.
You can hear
And the other one,
You cannot hear them? No? You can hear it?
I can hear it.
You can hear it?
Yeah,
It's like they're right there.
see that they can right
I know.
And the other one drinking the wine.
Oh, Edna? Yeah, Edna with the wine, yeah. She's saying my jokes are corny as she's drinking that wine.
See, I told you.
Mhm.
And I'm not looking at me.
All right.
So enjoy that home.
Next, it says mortgage interest. Mortgage interest, general real estate taxes, water taxes, and similar expenses are computed in some areas by using 360 days in a year and 30 days in a month. However, the rules in other areas provide for computing prorations on the basis of the actual number of days in the calendar month of closing. So, you guys remember I told you there was a difference between accounting weeks and calendar weeks? People get sensitive. Do you know the difference between accounting weeks and calendar weeks?
Yeah.
What is the difference?
It's calendar days, calendar day is like every day, business day is like Monday to
Oh,
Friday.
without Saturday.
Sorry, I'm having a blast with this
That's
chat.
okay.
Go ahead, Allie, keep going. No,
You
no,
understand what I said, right?
I know, I was just having a blast, but go ahead,
That's okay.
say it.
No, I said already. You understand what I said.
No, I didn't. Say
Oh,
it.
he was, you know the different calendar.
No, I know the difference. I want you to tell me the
I
difference.
know the difference. I
Okay.
told her already.
Go ahead.
I repeat.
You don't want to repeat? Okay, your daughter does not remember. Can you please explain again?
Oh,
Oh, she's on there too?
come on, go on.
All right. So, all right, congratulations to those that downloaded Facebook today to be here. I appreciate it.
All right, done.
So, and by the way, I'm just joking because I know it was impossible for some people. I almost did not make it here. So I know how it's impossible for some people. Now, what is accounting weeks? What is calendar weeks? It says right here that everything's calculated in accounting. So as you can see, mortgage interest, real estate taxes, water taxes, that's money, that's accounting. Is based on 30-day months. But we know some months have 31 days or even 28 or 29 days, right? So that means that in actuality, at the end of the year, we don't have months with 4 weeks. We have some months with 5 weeks. Accounting assumes that there's 4 weeks and 30 days in each month. So that means that at the end of the year, we have 48 total weeks because 4 weeks per month times 12 months is 48. But calendar weeks, we all know that we have 52 calendar weeks. And that's what I was trying to say. 52 calendar weeks. When we look at 360 days, there's 5 days missing, right? Plus we're establishing that it's 30 days per every month. Again, calendar different than accounting. In accounting, they're not thinking, hey, there's an extra day here, there's 1 day missing here. No, they put flat, 30 days, 12 months, that's it. So that's 48 weeks.
So when they pay-
Everybody get it?
That's what when I say weekly and they pay,
That's why we talked about the bi-weekly. When you pay bi-weekly, you will be able to pay faster because you're adding 2 more weeks. So 2 more payments. Yes. Okay.
What about
Yes.
February?
What about February?
That's 28 days.
Yes, but some
And now-
months have 31, so let's adjust it.
Oh, okay.
All right. We're just assuming that everything is leveled versus the January 31st, February 28th.
Yeah.
we assuming that every month has 30
Every month
days.
has the 30 days
Period.
flat.
So every month has 4 weeks.
Some
No,
months have 5,
some month has 5 weeks.
including the present month.
No, you get it, right? Every month does have 4 weeks.
Oh, gotcha.
Oh.
That was a good one.
Mhm.
I don't know if you guys knew this, but Janine just made a statement which is very valid, scientifically proven actually. Every month has 4 weeks. Type 1 if you understood that. Type 1 if you understood that.
Oh, boy. That's what I've been saying kids.
No.
Got it.
That'll be a trick question to test. How many weeks are in a month? Or guaranteed, whatever the heck.
Okay, only Melanie understood it? Everybody's still thinking, wait.
No, you know how they count, how you can tell when a month has 30 days or 31? They go like this, they go
Yeah.
January, February, yeah, whatever goes here,
Yeah,
it will be
my
30 or, 31, yeah.
I know, my grandma taught me that too, I
Yeah.
don't remember, but yes.
Yes.
All right,
What are you trying to say?
tell me, what are you processing? Where did you get stuck? With the accounting and calendar weeks, not the 4-week thing. That's, because every month does have it, you're right. That's part of an IQ test, actually.
That's what I was saying.
Yeah.
But it'll be like a trick question.
No, you won't have that. You're watching me from the TV. Do I look like a celebrity? Wow, she put me on TV. Grace, do you have the kids watching too, and the husband and all that stuff, and you're eating popcorn? This is like a reality show right now, and I'm your host, Bruno. Jasmine, what are you processing? What's your question? Go ahead. Because this, I need you to know before we move forward. If there's anybody that did not understand accounting versus calendar, make sure you type 2 so I go over it again. And give me the question. What is it that you're not understanding? It's totally fine. You don't get the math?
Oh, I need a calculator?
No. So you don't get the math when I was saying that it's 48 weeks versus 52 weeks? So if we go back up here, it says, so this is anything that's financial. We talk about accounting. If it's financial or involves bills, it's accounting, okay? Okay, cool. So what I'm saying here is, if it's mortgage interest, general real estate taxes, all right, awesome. So I'm glad you guys are saying that, so you don't go without knowing it, especially because we're gonna have math right after. But if it's mortgage interest, if it's real estate taxes, word taxes, or any other expenses, there's a bill that's issued to you, right? That bill is going to be calculated based on 12 months, because a year does have 12 months, right? Are we good so far? The bill has 12 months. Yes? Now, not the bill, the year. It has 12 months. Yes?
What?
Actually, the bill also has 12 months because it says what's your yearly interest.
Yes.
So you got 12 months. And we know that the months usually have 4 weeks. There are some there are odd months, they have like 5, right? And it might offset the bill. So what we're saying here is, instead of calculating the months that have 4 and the months that have 5, let's make everything flat for accounting purposes only. Let's make everything flat at 4 weeks, which is the most common. Most of the months have 4 weeks. Only. 4 weeks only. Let me add that to the statement before Janine says it again, that all months have it. So 4 weeks only. But some months have an extra week. Okay? So let's take that extra week out for accounting purposes. And if we have 4 weeks and there's 12 months, 4 times 12 is 48. So in terms of accountings, or for accounting purposes, there are 48 accounting weeks. Calendar weeks, however, we know that calendar weeks are 52. And that's what I was trying to say, because when you look here, it says to calculate anything that's accounting, we use 360 days and 30 days per month, so the 4 weeks. But in reality, we know that there's 365, sometimes 366 days, right? And there's 30 days or 31 days in the month, or even 28 or 29, depending if it's February. So all we're saying is that for accounting purposes, it's flat across the board, 4-week months times 12 months, it's 48 weeks. And that's going to be one of the things you need to understand, because when you start computing who has to pay what, you need to remember that. What happens to the extra days? So for accounting purposes, they're out. They're out of the picture for accounting purposes. That's all it is. That's why we made it flat 30 days across the board. For accounting purposes, they're out of the picture. It's just to make it easier to establish the payments. This way we divide the yearly payment divided by 12. Makes it a lot easier. Did you just say thank God?
That's when the monkey is your monkey.
Not my monkey. That's
So,
somebody else. All right. If you guys got it, give me a 1. If you got it now, give me a 1.
go for 2.
Yeah, I'll give you 2. All right, give me 100 push-ups. Not worry about the extra days. Not my monkey. Love it.
Oh, my God.
Yes, you don't have to worry about the extra days. That's it.
Sebastian's on this end?
Sebastian, no, I don't know what happened to Sebastian.
I thought you were there.
I thought, well, he'd be in class.
He's not a swimmer. No, just kidding.
Yeah, no, what do you say I was doing?
All right. He ran out the monster for the week. Eddie, you're funny. She's only drinking water, by the way. She mentioned earlier. I just didn't.
Oh, yeah, because we cannot see her.
Exactly. We can't see it. See, mine is water, Edna.
Hey, we don't see you put water in there. So we don't know.
You saw me. I was there.
But I didn't see.
All right.
What we got? That is water?
My wine is coffee. Thank you. Nobody brings me wine. All right. By the way, just so it's clear, I do accept donations. Hennessy is one of my best donations to be received ever. Just saying, putting it out there. Chocolates, putting it out there. Portuguese blood is made of wine. Yes, we're infused with wine at birth. We're born and the doctor smacks and goes, IV, wine. It's a wine transfusion. All right. Here, special assessments for such municipal improvements as sewers, water mains, or streets are usually paid in annual installments over several years. So I mentioned to you guys that special assessments or improvement taxes, right? Those are public improvement taxes. So you have the general tax, which the town assesses based on the value of your property. And then you have the additional taxes, which might be given to you because they improve the land. They improve the streets, they put lamps, whatever it is that will benefit your real estate. So you get an added assessment and therefore an added bill. Now that bill could be, I don't know, $20,000, $30,000, even $100,000. So what they do with these bills is they divide it over or spread it over several years so you don't pay it all at once, okay? Next, we have rents. Rents are usually adjusted on the basis of the actual number of days. Please underline actual number of days in the month of closing. Actual number of days in the month of closing. It is customary for the seller to receive the rents for the day of the closing and pay all the expenses for that day. If any rents for the current month are uncollected when the sale is closed, the buyer often agrees in a contract or by separate letter to collect the rents if possible and remit the share to the seller. So what we're saying is, we're closing on August 15th, right? Actually, give me a month, June. June is 30, right?
Yeah.
So June is 30, just to make it even. So we're closing on June 15th. We haven't collected the rents yet. But who's the new owner of the property? The buyer is, right? So the buyer is now collecting the rent for the whole month. Is it fair that the buyer gets to keep the whole month when they really just took possession 15 days? No, it's not fair. So there's again an adjustment. There's again an adjustment of that. So the seller says, hey, whenever you collect the rent, 15 days are mine. So you have to pay me at that point. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Okay. Also, if I already collected the whole month, I'm supposed to give you, the buyer, the 15 days left. Security deposits. Security deposits are generally transferred by the seller to the buyer. And the tenant must be notified of transfer deposit. We cover this. If there's a new owner, the new owner has to receive the lease and any escrows, which is in this case, the security deposit, and notify the tenant, hey, tenant, I am the new owner. Your money is now at Bank of America, for instance. Good?
Good. Yeah.
Next page, we have accounting for credits and charges. I pretty much already explained this. It's just summarizing what we said. It says that the items that must be accounted for in the closing statement fall into two general categories. Number one, prorations or other amounts due to either the buyer or seller. Those are credits, right? And paid for by the other party. Those are debits. So remember I said if it's unpaid items, the seller must credit the buyer. If it's prepaid items, the buyer must credit the seller. If it's an expense, like attorney's fees, right? If it's an expense like attorney's fees, then that party is responsible for that expense. So if you hired the attorney, you pay for it. If you hired the appraiser, you pay for it. You got it? Heidi, go ahead. Which part? Go ahead. We, so that's west and east. Go ahead, what's the question? You're confused about this section right here? The accounting? The deposits? The security deposit? Okay, great. So going back to the security deposit. Do we give it to the new landlord? So that's a good question. As I mentioned, you're the current owner of the, I'll look here as if they're here. So, you're the current owner of the property, so you're the seller, right? When we transfer the property to somebody else, all right, so that's exactly, yeah, perfect. So when we transfer the property to somebody else, there's a new buyer. Are we transferring the account? Most likely not, because that's too much work to go to the bank and say, bank, I'm giving the authorization on the account or the ownership of the account to the new owner. That's a lot of work. So at closing, what happens is that the title company issues a check to the buyer for that money, which is the security deposit. Okay? That check is issued. Now the buyer has to deposit that check in his or her own account and notifies the tenant, hey, tenant, I did receive your money. It's now with me in this account. You guys got it? So the previous landlord cannot keep the money or withhold the money. They have to transfer. They have to give at closing the form of a check. So title company prepares all that stuff and wires or gives a check to the new owner. Good? Give me a 1 if you got that. 1. Give me a 1 if you got that. Everybody, give me a 1. Good. You guys raising your hand just like that. Give me 1. All right. All right, we lost everybody here. Let me know you're still on. Okay, so Edna was still gulping on the wine. So yes, we got the 1.
Oh my gosh.
Melanie was delayed, so we got the 1. Perfect. Cool. I just want to make sure you guys are with me so I don't have to go back and forth, okay? So let's go back to the next page where we were. It says items credited to the buyer. So most items that are credited to the buyer are then debited to the seller, means taking from the seller. Debited to means taken from the seller, if you want to write it down. So it says, unpaid principal balance of outstanding mortgage, interest on existing assumed mortgage not yet paid, buyer's earnest money, so the deposit, Unearned portion of the rent collected. We talked about this. Janitor's salary, if it is like a property management that's being transferred, something like that. Tenants, secure deposits. We just covered this by now. Purchase money mortgage if the sale is financing. Unpaid water bills and real estate taxes that are behind. So anything that's pretty much unpaid or unearned must be transferred to the seller, to the buyer in this case. I'm sorry, to the buyer. Items credited to the seller. They're debited to the buyer, being taken from the buyer. The sales price. Who pays for the sales price? The buyer, right? Fuel, oil on hand. It's prepaid. Insurance and tax reserves. They're prepaid. Refund to the seller, prepaid water charge and similar expenses, and portion of real estate tax paid in advance. So again, we're talking about all the items. We're talking about prepaids must be credited to the seller and taken from the buyer. On the right-hand side, on top we have accounting for expenses. I already covered this. If it's an expense, it's a debit only. If it's an expense, it's a debit only. That means it's taken out from that party that acquired or incurred the expense. So if it's attorney fees, it's an expense, debit only. If it's appraisal fee, it's an expense, debit only, and so on. Next, we have arithmetic of prorations. Don't get scared by the name, arithmetic. It's nothing that bad. There are 3 basic methods of calculating prorations. Don't get scared of this. For now, I just want you to highlight exactly as it is here. Please tell me you guys can see everything that's on the screen clearly. I'll explain why you have to highlight exactly like this. Give me a 5 if you can see it clearly. A 5 if you can see it clearly. What's on the screen? Got to mess with them a little bit. They got used to the 1. All right. Did I lose some people in the process? Is everybody still there? Give me a 5, the ones that are still missing. If you're not there in the chat, give me a 10. All right, I got a wave. All right, high 5. And some people are just gone. Great. All right. So I was telling you guys to highlight exactly as it is here for one specific reason. Exactly as it is here for one specific reason. Number 1 and number 3, they start exactly the same way, and that's why it might be confusing. So real quick, Michelle, if you're watching, and I see you're watching because you're replying, go over to the, on the YouTube link. It should give you a chat on the right-hand side. See if you have that chat and try to type all your questions there so I don't go back and forth on my phone. Please. Make sure you're there, please. Let me know. Okay. So as I was saying, number 1 and number 3, they start exactly the same way. It says the yearly charge, and here it says the yearly charge. So the reason why I highlighted exactly this way is because the first one is the yearly charge, the second one is the monthly charge, and 3 is the yearly charge. I'm sorry, the daily charge. I'm so sorry. The daily charge, and I have highlighted them accordingly. Okay? So yearly charge is divided by, as we said before, 360 days or 12 months of 30 days each. The monthly charge is divided by the actual number of days in the month of the closing to determine the amount. And finally, the yearly charge is divided by 365 to determine the daily charge. So if it's something they have to figure out by the day, okay, how much is owed, then we use the daily charge. So 365 days, that's what we divide the charge by, and then you multiply by the amount of days remaining. That's what it says. Then the actual number of days of the proration is determined, and this is multiplied by the daily charge. Again, I'll explain better in math. Closing. The best part ever. Closing.
Yes,
All highlighted.
yes, give me my money.
Give me my money.
Now it's my monkey.
Now it's your monkey.
Yeah.
All right. It says the seller's attorney is responsible for all the details of the transaction that concern the title to the property, such as preparing the deed and making sure that any prior liens have been repaid. That's the seller's responsibility. The buyer's attorney prepares the settlement statements and makes necessary disbursements of the buyer's checks. And look what it says next. It is the usually the broker's responsibility to ensure that the parties appear at the designated time and place with the appropriate documents, and that arrangements have been made for any special factors, such as measurement of the seller's existing supply of heating fuel. Normally, the broker collects his or her commission at the closing. So the seller's attorney, as we were saying right now, is responsible for the details of the transaction, like all the information that goes onto the title, from the title, right? The buyer prepares the closing statement. Nowadays, it's the title company, but in traditional transactions, this is what happens. And then it says that the broker, and who represents the broker? We do. So we are responsible to make sure that all the parties have all the documents lined up and, very important, show up at the location and at the time, at the particular day that we set the closing to be. Because if the buyer does not show up or the seller does not show up, are we closing?
Nope.
We're not. Look at the last sentence. Normally, the broker collects his commission when? At closing. So if there's no closing, are you collecting money?
No.
No. Got it? So it's your job. Until now, I've always told you guys to client first, client first, client first, right? His or her interest above yours. Now everything was done, so your interest first. This is when you harass everybody. You're going to harass everybody and say, hey, Janine, buyer. Janine, buyer.
Yes.
Buyer. Okay?
Yes.
You know that we're closing on the 10th at 3 p.m. at 112 Jazz, right?
I'm the buyer.
You're the buyer. Say yes.
Yes.
Great. So Ida, hey, we're closing on the 10th at 3 p.m. at 112 Jazz. You got that, right?
I got that.
All right,
I got
great.
you.
You got me. All right. Allie, since you're representing both, and that's great. You're the realtor. You know that you should be there too, right? All right. This is the time we make sure we harass everybody to be there that particular day at that particular time, right? With the correct documents and monies. Because with zero money, that'd be awesome. Because if they don't bring all the documents, if they don't bring all the money, are we closing?
Nope.
No. That was my rant of the day. Make sure you have everybody lined up so you can close. And if you close, what goes to you? Money. You get paid. So if you guys screw up anywhere in this process, you won't get paid. So be good consultants. Make sure everything is lined up. At the end, it says other closing documents at closing. Other documents at closing, I'm sorry. It says every real estate sale must be reported to the IRS. You guys already know this. By one of the following: the person conducting the closing, the seller's attorney, the buyer's attorney, the title company, or the real estate broker. Somebody has to tell the IRS that we just had a closing. Okay? You guys got it? Somebody has to. If it's $10,000 or more, it has to be reported. You guys know this, right? All right, cool. So we have now finished chapter 21. I'm gonna end the stream, guys. So the 8 of you that are watching this, I'm gonna end, but there's another link in the group. There's another link in the group where you'll be able to rejoin the new one, okay? So go back to the group. It's the latest link there that says real estate map.
Can I go to that one?
Bathroom break.